This is Identity at the Center.
Welcome to the Identity at the Center podcast. I'm Jeff, and that's Jim. Hey, Jim.
Hey, Jeff, how are you?
Oh, not so bad yourself?
Good. Hey, I've been reading up on this Claude Mythos. I'm wondering, have you read about it? And I mean, look, I don't have really any hot takes except, what's in the news. But it's interesting to see that the AI kind of frontier models is what they're calling it, that they're kind of like going after cybersecurity software and cybersecurity capabilities now. So, I mean, that's quite the disruptor, don't you think?
I think it can be. I'm not sure how real some of it is or not because it's really kind of been closely held, but I think maybe that's part of the name mythos. It's just mythical until it becomes real. But certainly it seems to be like if it really is being held back because of security concerns and the fact that it is able to find things either that people haven't found yet or whatever it may be. I mean, that's just the world we live in now.
Yeah. I wonder if like finding bugs is really it's definitely a key capability, but I mean, cybersecurity is much more. But I think that the scare is like, okay, well, if this is where it's at now, where's it going to be 2-3 years down the road?
Well, that's what I've been saying. Right now, as the point in time, this is the least capable any of these tools will be. And they will just continue to become more and more capable. Now, I have changed my wording. I'm not saying good or bad anymore. I'm just saying capability-wise, this is the least capable it'll ever be.
Right. As it becomes more capable, it could become more bad, is I guess the implication of you change. Or more good, right? You're leaving the option open.
Yeah, I'm going to try and stay optimistic, but and I think it's well known, Jim, at this point, right? You're kind of like the Debbie Downer sometimes on the show, but I will say, yes, it is capable. It will continue to get more capable. That will open up new doors for both positive and negative things, and we'll deal with it the same way that the internet did, indoor plumbing did, electricity, horses and carriages versus cars, right? Things like that.
Yeah. Hopefully, we don't have a big stink coming up.
Hopefully not. I don't know how I'm going to segue into conferences after Big Stink. I guess to kind of kick back the fourth wall here is you mentioned before we hit recording that you were watching a documentary and something. I'm going to let you take it because
so in 1858 in London, there was an event called the Big Stink. At the time, indoor plumbing wasn't as much a thing, and they were pumping all the human waste right into the River Thames. There was also all the farm runoff and all the tanneries and all the industrial waste was also going into the river. And people were also drinking from that water. It just sounds like it was pretty awful. Toilets and sewage, or modern sewage systems are a blessing that we take for granted.
Indeed. And if you have questions or comments, I would urge you to connect with Jim on LinkedIn, send him a message or something around that topic. I'm sure you would appreciate it, right, Jim?
All these things you can learn about using an AI prompt or by going to YouTube and watching a video that someone created or they had an AI create.
Yeah, this is true. Like I said, this is the least capable what things have been. You can learn anything about anything pretty much anywhere on the internet at this point.
That's the truth.
One of the things that I'm interested in learning more about as a perfect professional segue is the EIC conference that you and I are going to be at later this year. We're hitting it up in May. It's May 19th to 22nd. We do have a discount code, so hopefully people are taking advantage of that. It is IDAC25MKO. We'll have that on our website as well. So idacpodcast.com. If you just scroll down a little bit, you'll see all the different discount codes we have. But looking forward to being in Berlin for the second time, Jim.
Yeah, I know. And one thing I would recommend is if people are going, show up a day early, go to the Identiverse event. If you're not following Espen Bago already, he's somebody to follow or connect with on LinkedIn. And you'll certainly see the announcement for when registration is available. Go out and register. It's a free event. You just show up and have a beer and meet your fellow identity practitioner professionals.
Yeah, it's kind of like, I think typically like a pay your own way, buy your own beer, right? Things like that. I think kind of shun away from like corporate sponsorships and things like that. But you and I went to the one last year, right on the river there, and it was awesome. We broke out the
Yeah.
camera, did kind of a live recording there, from the picnic tables. I don't remember the name of the place, but it was pretty cool, and I'm sure we'll find another good spot to maybe do that again this year.
Yeah. For my money, like turning on the cameras actually made it more fun. Wasn't like making it into a work thing. It was just like conversations. And I think that's every podcast we do is it's meant to be a conversation, not a presentation. And so that's what I think is going to be great talking with Warwick today. Is very conversational, very much a friend of the show. And do you want to go ahead and introduce him?
Yeah, you've already kind of half started it, but yeah, Warwick Ashford, he's joining us today. He's a senior analyst at KuppingerCole. Last year, he was the MC. We're going to find out if he's going to reprise his role again this year. Welcome back to the show, Warwick.
Thanks very much, Jeff, and to Jim. Very interesting and entertaining to hear your intro there. And I quite like your analogy, because for me with cybersecurity is very much like that. I think Roald Dahl describes in one of his autobiographical books about how his sister was very badly injured when she went through the front window of their car, because in those days they didn't, they had one of the very first cars their family did, apparently, and there was no such thing as safety glass. And I think that's very much the way the cybersecurity industry has always been. Is like we wait for people to get cut, and then we go, oh, maybe we should fix that.
Yeah, I feel like that's almost like human nature. It's like, all right, let's, okay, so this bad thing happened, or maybe sometimes it takes multiple times, unfortunately, for bad things to happen, and then we decide to do something about it. I'm not going to ask you your origin story because we already did that last time. So for people to learn more about Warwick and kind of how he got into the space, go back episode 338. That was March of 2025. So it's been about a year. But let's start with the last year. Warwick, what have you been up to?
All sorts. A lot of the work that I've been doing has been on a leadership compass on managed detection and response. So that's kind of more on the security side of things. But it's one of the reports that I really enjoy doing because it's an interesting market, and it seems to be growing and evolving quickly. Because I think just most organizations just aren't able to cope with this kind of always on cybersecurity team, keeping tabs on everything that's going on in the neighborhood. And I think that this managed detection and response is playing an increasing role there, and I think it will continue to do so, because you speak to some CISOs and they go, I'll never let anything happen outside my control or my purview and so on. But the fact is, there's just if you look at the legislation that's happening and at the rate that technology is evolving, as you've were alluding to earlier, especially now we're this whole new AI era. I just think most organizations just don't have the resources to cope with that. And so you just need to bow to the economies of scale. So that's kind of, I've been spending a lot of time around on that. And, that doesn't, part of that evolution includes the increasing focus on identity with things like activity recording, which relates to accountability. But in terms of security and identity, I guess the most relevant things I've been working on include a leadership compass on secure remote access, or SRA, for OT and ICS, which has been a lot of fun. And I've done a couple of white papers on third-party access governance, TPAG, another acronym to add to our things. And that's really interesting, because I think what sets SRA for OT and ICS apart from kind of general purpose remote access solutions is kind of the need to accommodate legacy hardware, proprietary protocols, and control system architectures that lack native security controls, such as authentication, they don't have encryption or audit logging. So, and organizations are also under pressure to comply with regulations such as it's IEC, I think it's 62443, and then NERC-CIP in the US, and of course the EU's NIS2 directive. So, so that's kind of where I've been focused for the past year or so.
So only a couple things. What are some of the major trends that you've seen? Like, is it just AI is just kind of consuming everything, but are there other areas maybe that are, shifts, trends that are kind of adjusting the way you look at or shape where you put your attention?
Yeah, well, I mean, obviously AI is a big part of the conversation, and people need to be aware of it. But I think the work that I've done around SRA and TPAG has been fun because it's kind of helped me to understand how identity is becoming the control plane of modern cybersecurity. So I've been putting some attention on that and written some advisory notes around that, and perhaps we can talk about that a bit later as well.
Warwick, let's talk about the EIC. First off, what does EIC stand for? And second off, are there any central themes or narratives that are pulling the conference together this year?
Yeah, EIC is one of those kind of interesting acronyms because it started off as the European Identity Conference, and then along came this whole cloud era, and everybody was all about cloud. AI hadn't happened yet, so everyone was talking about cloud. Cloud was the hot topic. So it evolved into the European Identity and Cloud Conference, but for reasons best known to the organizers at that time, they retained the acronym EIC. So that's where we've gone forward. Yeah, you asked about the themes. Well, the tagline that we opted for this year is digital trust through intelligent identity, and basically this was just to emphasize the idea of digital trust, because ultimately I think that's what it's really all about. It's really about trust. That's what's necessary for digital businesses to work effectively and efficiently. And I think it's going to be one of the key areas of focus. And then intelligent identity, that's a nod to the application of AI in the identity field. And on the flip side of that is dealing with agentic identity. And those are kind of going to be also two key areas of focus at EIC.
Yeah, and you mentioned the whole idea of identity and trust, and I really think the addition of machines and artificial intelligence, which we talked about in the previous set of questions, how's that evolving versus previous years? I mean, it feels like the past year has been a quantum leap, but I know we were talking about these things last year. So,
yeah, absolutely
how
right.
would you describe that?
Yeah, no, you're absolutely right. These things have been touched on in previous years, but I think it's definitely moved up a notch in the past year, as you said. And this is reflected in topic areas such as we've got a block on identity threat detection and response, another hot acronym, ITDR. On Wednesday afternoon and Friday morning, we had so much response in the call for speakers to this topic. So we're going to be looking on Wednesday and Friday, we're going to be looking at how organizations are moving from traditional IAM to ITDR, at the role of AI in security, obviously, and at how service accounts and application identities can be abused in ways that are hard to detect, and how most privileged access is still out of control for that reason, and how to spot identity compromise. And there's a panel discussion on how to operationalize ITDR. And then, of course, the other block that I think is relevant here is the trustworthy AI and autonomous identity decisioning, which is going to be on Thursday morning, and that's looking at how AI actually gets used in identity systems today. So we've been spending a lot of time talking about it theoretically, but I think what's going to be good at EIC this year is kind of looking at how it actually is being used, and the need to verify not only identity but also purpose in the context of the purpose of AI and the failure models in AI identity management. So what happens when things go wrong? Have you got a kind of a fail-safe plan? And there'll also be a panel discussion on machines with identities, securing AI agents and synthetic actors, another great term that we're coming to try and grapple with. And this is looking at the risks and opportunities of agent-driven interactions and how to prepare IAM architecture for AI native actors. And there's even a workshop on non-human and agentic AI identity, which is going to be aimed at exploring emerging standards, modern identity architectures, and practical frameworks for establishing trust, there's that word again, and enforcing control access across autonomous identity ecosystems. So quite a lot there around those two areas.
Yeah, you mentioned workshop there. So what is the difference between a workshop and a session?
Well, sessions are kind of usually presentations where you've got somebody who stands up and runs you through 20 minutes of their insights, and there's a small opportunity to ask questions at the end. Whereas workshops are far more practically oriented. Often, the people conducting the workshops will give people practical tasks to carry out, or just there's a lot more participation. So it's kind of as more interactive than you'd say in a session. So those are held pre-conference, and those will be on Tuesday morning.
Yeah, I'm sure people love getting a combination of the two. One of the things you mentioned earlier was intelligence as well. I was wondering if you were going to start talking about this identity visibility intelligence platform concept, but I think intelligence and visibility are a big theme that you see in the industry outside of, I think, AI and machines take all of the take all of the air out of the room, or they get all the attention. But there are other reasons that people go to these conferences, right? A lot of times they're not quite there yet, and they're still trying to lay the groundwork, whether it's identity governance, privilege access management, even authentication. So does the conference kind of take that into account? And is this intelligence and visibility, is that kind of a bridge between the two? It's kind of the modern edition of some of these like things that we've been talking about for over a decade.
Well, I think, we like to say anyway that EIC is an opportunity for like-minded people to just talk about the issues that they're facing. I think that's the value of this conference, is that there is a lot of opportunity for networking over lunches and in between. It's not. I like to think it's not as frenetic as perhaps other conferences. As that you guys have experienced it, so correct me if you think I'm wrong, but I'm very biased in this view. But the way we've designed it is kind of that there is a lot of time to be able to just talk to people and compare notes and say, well, this is what we're trying. What are you trying? How are you dealing with this? And we like to think that that's kind of where the magic really happens. So obviously, being on the agenda team, I'm very focused on the content and the presentations and all that kind of thing. But I mean, we like to think anyway that the kind of the magic and what keeps people coming back year after year is just the opportunity to meet as a community and not to be just rushing around. It's a fairly contained venue, I think. And there's just plenty of opportunity there, just kind of to network and with your peers and look at the things that everyone's sort of grappling with.
You mentioned the word frenetic, and that is like the perfect word because look, Jim and I go to a lot of conferences, and a lot of them are pretty frenetic for us. We're running around, we're trying to do live episodes. Sometimes we're on the agenda doing game shows or whatever, and it's very busy. But having gone now to EIC last year for the first time, I was telling everybody, like, this is a great conference. Even if you are, in the US and you're coming over there, and like Jim and I were for the first time, you get exposure to a lot of international themes that we just don't see typically here in the US. And so I think it's a perfect kind of combination of conferences. When I think about sort of like the main conference circuit for me every year, it's, now it's EIC, and then it's Identiverse, and then it's kind of Gartner's IAM thing, later in the year, at least for the US. And it's three very different audiences. And the way that I've described it to people, and I'm curious to hear if this resonates with you, is EIC is kind of like where the big thinkers are. Here's where the direction of the industry is going, whatever it may be from an identity security perspective and sort of everything around, identity. Identiverse tends to be like the doers and the practitioners, the people who are like doing things. Lots of vendors as well with solutions to solve all your identity problems. And then I see kind of Gartner at the end of the year as sort of like the executive conference. How do you get funding, buy-in, at least for the US, to do the things that the big thinkers and the doers want to do and translate to an executive? And I'm curious does that make sense, like from those three different sort of viewpoints?
Yeah, absolutely. And it's actually very heartwarming to hear you say that. Thank you very much, because that's kind of what has been the ethos of EIC. I mean, I've only been with KuppingerCole for I think roughly 6 years now, but I've been attending EIC in my previous life as a cybersecurity journalist. I've been to about 15, so I kind of have seen the evolution over the years and have kind of got into the whole way of it. And that's why I enjoy working on the agenda team, is because I feel like I have a fairly good understanding of what makes it different. And those are the things that we try to engineer in, and that we like to think that people come back each year for. So, while we were kind of not stuck in one way of doing things, and that we try to kind of move it on each year and to kind of make it as relevant as possible and updated as much as possible, and to try new things. I think that's at its core what we're trying to preserve. And it's great to hear that that's your perspective of it, because that's kind of what we're going for.
I think Jeff summarized it the way I see it as well. I would add on to what I think I felt at the EIC last year was two things. One is obviously a very much more compliance driven and privacy driven. Maybe it's use cases that people are trying to solve, but I think it's kind of a tone. I think the other tone was less of a vendor solution approach to solving identity use cases, and more of like a open architecture. Or, I think the big theme that I took away from last year was the identity fabric. And if you look at the identity fabric, there's generations of IAM tools that are in your environment, and you need to make them work together, right? There's not going to be a rip and replace. There's not going to be a consolidation down to a single vendor. I do think that is the magic wand that people try to wave in the U.S. Having worked in the U.S. for over 20 years in IT and information security, it's always like, what are the tools? What are the vendors that are going to stand behind us and give us a product that's going to solve all or most of our needs? And we have as few different other products plugging in. I think that's changing somewhat, because in the identity space, there's just so many new vendors who are creating solutions that are great. They're above and beyond what you can get from packaged solutions. But then you start to see consolidation where those small companies get absorbed. In other words, get bought out by bigger companies, and they just add it to their portfolio. So I guess in summary is that I think the U.S. approach is more of a product-focused approach, but I was picking up in Europe is it's more of an architecture or an open architecture approach, something like Identity Fabric.
Yeah, we like to think that, again, our EIC brings together, as you say, kind of the kind of people who are shaping the way things are pan out. And the Identity Fabric is, again, one of the workshops. It's one of the workshops this year, which KuppingerCole will be presenting. So, if anyone's interested in how they can assess their maturity in the whole IAM space, and how, as you said, they can make what they have work for them, and how they need to identify the gaps where they need to go, then probably that workshop is a good workshop for them to attend. But yeah.
Well, I'm looking forward to really the entire conference. I will, for the layman person in me, I had a lot of and moments last year, which, hopefully that translates well across, video and audio. But, I saw as goes, like, it really kind of got me thinking a lot of different things, based on what was presented. I'll tell you, the highlight for me was you mentioning the podcast as kind of like your opening salvo, and the fact that some people actually clapped and knew who we were was amazing. So thank you for all that support on it. Appreciate it.
Yeah, well, although, as it's the European Identity and Cloud Conference, we're trying to be as international as possible, and we're getting more and more international content as the years go by. And yes, I think, it would be wrong to go, well, that's not for me. That's kind of for a European audience, because I think it's relevant to anyone working in the space. So, hopefully people won't be put off by that. But I think the European perspective also helps because, it just, because of the way the legislation is in the European context and just where the governments are working, it can help to sort of, as you say, spark ideas and draw parallels and so on. So, yeah.
I always say, a good identity person is a well-rounded identity person. Obviously well-rounded identity, but also the world at large and different cybersecurity and regulations and things. Identity is global, right? It can't just be myopic and be just one specific area. So I think more ideas is good. I'm curious from like a theming perspective this year, if, are there, I'm going to assume AI is going to kind of be a big theme, but are there other things that you expect to kind of like dominate sort of where things are at today from an identities perspective?
It's not so much like thematic, but I mean, this year's EIC keynotes, if we look at those, they focus on how identity is becoming the foundation of digital business. Because I think that's also one of the things that EIC is kind of stands out for, or is different about it. It's kind of looking more at how to enable business, how business, how from the business perspective. So here we're looking at, identity becoming the foundation of digital business in the age of AI. And, obviously expect an emphasis on agentic and non-human identities and how to establish trust, governance, where we as KuppingerCole, I'll pick on governance, and security in machine-driven ecosystems. There's also going to be a spotlight on digital sovereignty, obviously being European, and government-led identity initiatives, including EU wallets, of course, and national identity frameworks, alongside the growing role of standards, as you mentioned, in compliance and certification. The keynotes also cover identity-centric cybersecurity, from quantum threats to zero trust and identity fabrics, as we've already mentioned. In the opening keynote, as always, is going to be Martin Kuppinger, the distinguished analyst, and our co-founder. He's going to be talking, his topic is From Workforce to Everything, the next chapter of identity security and governance. So that'll be his bit of crystal ball gazing there. And then he's going to be joined by the one and only Eve Marler and privacy advocate Max Schrems for a panel discussion entitled Consent's Journey from Annoying to Meaningful. I can just hear Eve saying that, actually. And can tech actually eliminate cookie consent boxes? So I think that's going to be pretty fun. And digital identity and cybersecurity policy expert Lucas Ilves. Now, this is one that I was particularly involved in. He's going to be speaking on the agentic state. What next for digital government? I'm really looking forward to this because he's from Estonia, and he's currently been seconded as an advisor to the Ministry of Digital Transformation in Ukraine on questions of AI and digital transformation. So, I think his presentation will probably be very good, but I mean, again, he's going to be on site. And so, anyone who wants to talk to him about his experiences will be able to access him there. So I think that's one, if you were to ask me one thing that you're really looking forward to, I think that's probably my highlight. And then, as you mentioned, we've got the kind of movers and shakers. We've got AI policy advisor at the European Parliament, Kai Zenner. He's spoken at EIC before, and he'll be looking at the question, will AI in Europe succeed with GDPR unchanged? So, I think that's also going to be interesting because you've got the EU Data Act is aimed at sort of opening up access to connected device and service data and driving interoperability via common data spaces. But this is potentially at odds with the GDPR, which is going, no. So he's asking, can this form an enforce and share path that avoids rewriting GDPR? So that could be quite interesting because he's within the EU. And then Florian Koptil will be there. He's EU digital identity and business wallets expert, and he'll be speaking on EU business wallets shaping the future of digital identity in Europe. And I think that could be interesting for audiences all around the world. And then another one that I'm looking forward to, we're going to have John Peart, who is the chief executive of the let me get this right, Office for Digital Identities and Attributes in the UK Department of Science, Innovation and Tech. My goodness. Anyway, he's going to be talking from framework to function. This is all about the UK's approach to delivering trusted digital identity at scale. So I think, the UK is kind of very special when it comes to identity. They're very, they tend to be very circumspect about what they, but the idea of a national ID is a kind of bit of an anathema here. So this session, I think, is going to be interesting, and is going to be aimed at exploring the technology standards and assurance mechanisms that can now underpin trust in the UK market. So, we can do it here, then eventually anybody can do it, kind of thing. So there's kind of a lot to, there's a lot to look forward to. Well, these are just the opening day keynotes. Joni Brennan's coming this year. She missed out. We wouldn't have her last year. She's coming this year, which as you may or may not know, she's the president of the Digital ID and Authentication Council of Canada. I think Canada has always had a pretty good perspective on identity, and she's chosen the topic sovereign by design. So this is kind of talking about parallel paths to digital trust and identity in a world that isn't waiting. So I've been keen to know what she's envisaging there. Eve's also coming back to talk about the identity collision in the C-suite. I wasn't sure what this was all about, but kind of her explanatory notes are the hidden conflicts inside executive teams and why identity professionals feel the impact first. So that sounds like it could be pretty interesting. And then we've also got digital identity and trust framework expert Elizabeth Garber, who I'm sure you're very familiar with. And she's going to be speaking on identity and a changed United States, which could be pretty interesting. She's being a bit guarded about exactly what she'll be discussing, but I think that'll be an interesting one. And there'll also be keynotes on when models run the business risk, trust, and the new AI identity economy. And then also we're getting a perspective from the We Build consortium on their kind of forays into the wallet world. And then also our guys, panel of discussion by the KuppingerCole analysts and advisors. We're going to be talking about how to succeed in IAM under constant change. So yeah, a lot, and that's just day one.
I mean, there's so many good conversations taking place, and it's sometimes tough to hit them all. I know we talk about being there in person, but if I'm remote, can I stream some of this content as well?
Yeah, I mean, this is kind of an artifact from COVID, which means that we record all the sessions now. So, I mean, that has the double benefit or triple benefit of the fact that you don't have to make those horrible decisions. To me, that's one of the worst things about conferences. You sit there with the agenda and you think, well, this looks good, this looks good, this also looks good. Which one do I take a bet on? And then you rush off to that particular venue. You kind of squeeze your way in, you get a seat if you're lucky, and then within the first 5 minutes you go, oh no, I made the wrong decision. Oh no, horror. I should have gone to one of the others. But the great thing about EIC is because everything is recorded, it just means that you don't have to make those decisions. You can decide, okay, I want to perhaps meet this person or see what they like in person, but you know that you're not going to miss anything because you can always catch it up. And if you've got a full ticket, then you've got access afterwards. So you can even go and watch things again. You can say, I remember, or you can share with your colleagues and say, I heard this really great talk at EIC. I think it would benefit you or the team or whatever. And then you still have access to the content afterwards. So thanks, COVID. It's kind of resulted in that. And I think, I mean, I'm not aware of other conferences that do that, but I think it's fairly unusual that you can watch things back and watch all the content given time and opportunity. I mean, even if you're running late on the day and you're stuck in your hotel room for whatever reason, you can catch the beginning or whatever. So I think it's kind of one of the things that I like to think is pretty good about EIC and that you wouldn't get at other conferences.
I mean, I do appreciate it because it solves that dilemma of I need to be in 5 places at once and I can't be in any of them. So being able to catch content later is fantastic. I would highly encourage any conference to pick that up. I know there's cost associated with it, but I think it's worth it. You're part of the the council, right, that looks at the different content coming in. I'm curious if there's something like, is there something under the radar, something that's like you've got your eye on, it's like, man, I really hope people look at this kind of hidden gem that you think that might be out there.
Yeah, it was quite tricky this year. There were areas that we hoped there would be more on that there wasn't. But as you say, there were things that we got content on that we weren't expecting. I mean, I think one of the things that I'd like to mention here is there's a block on quantum safe identity. So on Thursday afternoon, this is kind of looking at the risk of making the wrong decisions today about architecture, priorities, and investments. It's looking at the need to start thinking now about things like cryptography, legacy protocols, and how they will mitigate the quantum safe approaches. And there's a panel discussion on what organizations should change before the next budget cycle. So this is focusing on concrete decisions around cryptography, identity architecture, tokens, certificates, and third-party dependencies. And so I think overall this block looks at what needs to be fixed in your identity stack right now. And, so you're not exposed later, because I think, most people agree that while this is not a problem right now, it will soon become, and you need to start planning. And I think as far as the other emerging topics are concerned, look out for sessions on identity for non-human and agentic systems, identity in constrained or disconnected environments. I think there's one particular presentation that kind of looks at it in the military context. And of course, identity is the foundation for everything, and Martin's keynote. So I think those are going to be the sort of important things to try and hit.
So, Warwick, I wanted to get into some of the logistics of the conference. And first, I'll say that you can go to our idacpodcast.com website. We've got a link to register directly to go in and register. And we've got a discount code worth 25% off your passes for EIC. But I wanted to get some sense of, okay, where's the conference? Like the who, what, when, and where. How many people can attend? Where is the conference? When is the conference? Stuff like that.
Okay. Well, I think this is actually the 20th year since the founding of the conference, but this is the 19th one because we obviously missed one thanks to COVID. So this is the 19th one, and it's principally aimed at identity and cloud professionals. Obviously, it's in the title, but this includes CIOs, CISOs, industry leaders, and peers to kind of learn, and as we've been talking about, discuss and expand connections. It's making all the right connections and growing influence in the digital identity and cloud computing world. I think if you mentioned it, it's 19 to 22 May, and it's at the Berlin Congress Center, which is near Alexanderplatz. So if anyone's been watching Hijack on Apple TV, you will be familiar with that area. I really enjoyed it because I went, oh yeah, I've been there, and and obviously online as we've been discussing. We're expecting in total, both physical and virtual, about kind of 1,500. That's sort of the level we just got around that last year. So we're hoping to kind of match that again. There are around 250 speakers, give or take, because we keep on sort of acquiring people. Even now, like everyone's going to work. I should be speaking at the EIC. And we're like, dude, the call for speakers opened like a year ago, but hey, anyway, and that's kind of about 200 sessions. But I mean, that sounds a lot, but as we've been saying, you don't have to make all the decisions. Then day one, we've got 13 keynote sessions. That's kind of the big keynote day, setting all the sort of themes and tones and so on, plus the workshops that we mentioned. And then the two kind of middle days, they've got 9 keynote sessions plus 5 parallel streams. So this is where potentially you're going to have to make a decision, but it's not too serious. And the 5 streams that we've chosen this year are future of identity and decentralization. So I mean that's kind of core to EIC. And then the content that I enjoy the most, the real world identity use cases. And this is just looking at what companies are actually doing in the real world. Then we've got a stream on enterprise IAM and the infrastructure. That's also going to be obviously looking at the whole AI thing in that context. And then the importance area of governance, privacy and compliance, and finally emerging tech and identity fabrics. So so that you mentioned identity fabrics earlier, and so that that is kind of a whole stream that's going to be looking at those kind of things. And the fourth day is there are only just 6 keynote sessions, but we're also having the 5 parallel streams on those days too. So but and as far as highlights are concerned, we've got BMW going to be speaking about their digital IAM governance, which is cool. And sticking with auto manufacturers, we've got lessons learned migrating a legacy on-prem PAM environment into a modern cloud-native solution at Mercedes-Benz. And then we've got a fun session from Dean Sachs. I'm sure you know him well. Called Breaking Glass, Restoring My Digital Life. This is he's going to be looking at what it'll take to restore your digital identity or digital life if you were to lose all your devices at once. I think that could be one not to miss. And then we also have a session on how not to onboard as a relying party, lessons learned and common mistakes from the German EUDI wallet sandbox ecosystem. So you
mentioned a lot of speakers from the US and Canada. You mentioned Jody, you mentioned Eve, you just mentioned Dean. By the way, Eve is coming out with her book. It's going to be released in a couple of weeks. Probably by the time this episode it goes out, it's like 2 weeks out. I think that's going to be so. In addition to all those fantastic European-based speakers, you've also got a lot of people coming in from North America. Really looking forward to it. And I'm just interested, and I think I know the answer to this, but 1,500 attendees on site and virtual, 250 speakers, 250 sessions. How do you keep the quality? How do you make this year better than last year? And where I was going to say, I think I knew the answer. Shout out to Marina Kordash. She is the person who's been, coordinating. Jeff and I are going to be recording a few podcasts on site. Marina is the person who I think does a lot more coordinating than we see, but she's been coordinating with us. I got to imagine there's a lot of behind the scenes happening here.
Oh, absolutely. I mean, we have a whole events team that's kind of dedicated to this. So, this is our flagship event, and so a lot of time and resources goes into this. But we're just hoping that having organized it around the 5 streams, that it's kind of more or less logical. I mean, it's quite a kind of a puzzle to try and work out, where we think the most people are going to be and what size the rooms are and all that kind of thing. But I mean, we work as a greater expanded team, and hopefully we've got it right this year. I mean, we've taken feedback from last year and tried to kind of improve. That's what we try to do every year. So hopefully that will help. And we've tried to design it in blocks, so we kind of where a topic will be introduced, and then to try and move from the general to the specific where possible. And I think the 20-minute format also helps. It's kind of short, it's sharp, it's focused. We get lots of things. Oh, can't I have 30 minutes? Can't I have 40 minutes? Oh, gee, an hour would be really great. And everything. Well, people's attention spans are not that long anyway. And so at least we try to kind of get as much different content, and by keeping it in the 20-minute format, that just means that it's succinct and it's focused, and people aren't just going rambling on. And we hope that it encourages the speakers to kind of just lay out what's really important. And what can I say? As a member of the agenda team, these sessions have been carefully curated, so hopefully that'll ensure the quality. So.
Well, let me ask you a more of a philosophical question, because I've seen this trend of identity and security sort of blending over the last few years. And, I want to know what you think drives that. But I also want to ask a question. Does this bug you as much as it bugs me? The phrase that identity is the new perimeter. to me, I'm so tired of hearing about that because I've been hearing about that for, I feel like 5 years, 6 years, 7 years, and it's been there. And so if you're just now realizing that identity is the new perimeter, it's like, okay, it has been, but I hear that so often, and it just, maybe it's just me, and I just, grinds my gears a little bit every time I hear identity is a new perimeter. But I'm curious what your take is on this sort of convergence between identity and just security at large.
I think identity as the new perimeter was kind of like a shorthand that we all developed, wasn't it? Because we kind of all knew what we were talking about. And I think for me now, this year really is kind of, that's where my thinking has gone now. Whereas I'm seeing identity more as kind of that control plane where but rather than talking of it as a perimeter. And last year, or in previous 2 years, I think, we had security as a discrete stream, but we just realized that security is really or identity and security are so intertwined that it's sort of silly to kind of separate them out in a way. So what we've done with the 5 streams this year is to kind of just have the security related content appear in context where it kind of makes the most sense. So as I was saying earlier, we go from the kind of general to the specific. We're going from, laying out the kind of, this is the area of discussion, and this is how security fits into it, and this is, this is why it's relevant here. So I think that approach is possibly, we're hoping is going to make more sense than stripping it out as a kind of discrete stream, and hopefully it'll just make sense to people to have that content in the right place and in the right context, and that kind of thing. And I saw some discussion around, I think Eve was weighing in saying she was also irritated by it. So you're not alone.
Well, I'm a good company if Eve's also irritated by it. But I also now think about it, it's like, okay, I just kind of got on my soapbox there for a minute and shouted sort of like, get off my lawn, right, so to speak. Maybe it is that, I'm too close to identity and people are maybe not identity experts and they are now discovering it for whatever that means, right, for the first time. Maybe they were, in a different area of security and identity wasn't part of their day job as much, even though it's kind of everywhere, but maybe it's not their core focus. And so I have to kind of remind myself that people are still discovering identity. But what bothers me most is when I hear people at the executive level, the C-suite, CISOs, CIOs that are just now discovering that identity is the new perimeter.
Well, it's the same thing it's the same thing you just said, Jeff, because I think there are CISOs who really haven't spent time doing identity. And they're serious people. They're great at what they do, but this is a new area for them. So hearing this is like, it takes some time to absorb, because if you focus all your time on building perimeters and security tools, and someone comes along and says, identity is the new perimeter, you have to hear it enough times because at first you want to reject it.
Okay.
Well, I think you're absolutely right. I think you're absolutely right, though. I think, that because this is something that we work with and the kind of connections are so obvious and to us, it is maybe not something where the kind of leadership has been. And, fortunately now, I think it's great that this awareness does seem to be growing, and hopefully those who attend EIC will, they'll have their aha moment too, where they'll go, oh yeah, this is kind of, why haven't I seen it before? Because I think once you've seen it, you see it, but maybe because that's not your day job, you may not see it. You just kind of see security as being about other things, and identity is just kind of being kind of tangential. But it's, as we know, security is at the center. Identity is at the security. Identity is and security is at the center. So.
Well, obviously we're in the right place for that. That's why I call it that. Yeah, I'll get off my soapbox and stop yelling. Get off my lawn, right? Those types of things. It just, I don't know what it is. Like I said, it just kind of personally irks me. It's like, it's been here for a while. Like, come on, catch up. Like where we're at. Okay, let's change topics and let's get into things that we do on the side. I asked you what you do for fun when you're not, being MC extraordinaire and analyst extraordinaire with KC. You mentioned theater. And so I want to hear what maybe your like most memorable theater moment is, either, and it can be anything, right? It can be positive, it can be negative, it can be like, that was kind of interesting or weird or fun or sad or whatever it may be. So I'm curious, like, what's your favorite or most memorable theater moment?
Yeah, that's actually quite difficult because I think every time I go to the theater, it is kind of, I find it a kind of a visceral experience, and I find it a very kind of emotional experience because it kind of takes you places where you kind of maybe not expecting to go. It makes you, very much like EIC conferences, kind of makes you see things in a different way, or kind of see things from a different perspective, or kind of just feel things. And, it's kind of in a way that the film doesn't, it communicates like on that basic level. And my confession about it, I tend to try and sit like quite near the front row, so I'm sort of where I like to be where you can literally see the spit bubbles, and you can just make that connection. And yeah, I mean, I think Tom Stoppard's Leopoldstadt was kind of an amazing thing. Kind of the whole. It's an amazing play, and it takes you through several generations of kind of the Jewish community in Vienna. That's an amazing play. I think musical theater is what I enjoy the most, but I like it to be meaningful stuff. So I think my favorite all time is Les Miserables, because that's based on what I think is a stunning Victor Hugo novel. And what I particularly appreciate about it is how those who've created the show have translated Hugo's text into music and song, and just that whole process fascinates me, of translating something that's brilliant in and of itself into something else, and kind of making it just even more special. It's something that's different, but it's kind of special. So that's also, one of the other my favorite shows is Sunday in the Park with George, which is about the artist Georges Seurat, about his creative process. And I saw the painting Le Grand Jatte in Chicago when I was there a couple of years ago. And I mean, when you come, I've seen hundreds of prints of this painting, but to come face to face with this painting was just quite an emotional moment, and it reminded me of the show. And so that's why, in fact, next weekend I'm going to see a show about the kind of creative process of Monet. So we'll see how that compares with the Seurat thing. But yeah, a lot of people go, "Oh yeah, musical theater, that's kind of rubbish." But I think there are kind of levels, and I think shows like Les Mis have got that gravitas and that sort of universal human story that goes beyond kind of just boy meets girl kind of musicals that we kind of tend to know. Yeah.
I don't have a ton of experience with theater, but I'll tell you my favorite. Before Jim, I tell yours or you tell yours. My wife and I went to London last year, maybe it was a couple of years ago at this point, and we saw A Comedy of Errors at the Globe Theater. And it's probably a touristy thing to do, but it was such a great experience, like being there and paying extra for the cushion on the seat, right? Things like that. But being there and being, amongst the players of the show and having them, talk through things and see that and seeing the spit bubbles, and maybe there is a correlation between the frequency of spit bubbles and the quality of actor. I'm not quite sure, but it was such a great experience. And it's not something that I normally seek out, because I'm more of a, sit in the comfort of my own home, watch it on my, giant TV and surround sound. But there is something to be said to be in the location and having people who are passionate about that craft put on a really good show. And obviously it helps when the content is also good and relevant. And the fact that, we saw A Comedy of Errors, and the fact that it was written like 400, 500 years ago at this point, plus, and that there's still relevance to it is shocking in my view.
Yeah, no, it's true, and I think the risk. I've been watching the Netflix series The Spy, and as you say, it's just you kind of look at how things that are about times gone by, and it just how it brings home that how the human condition is the human condition and the way we react. So that the kind of the spy is kind of Mossad in a previous era to now, but you can almost kind of see how those tensions are still here and how they're translated in the situation that we're experiencing in the world today. Is no matter how much things change, and I think this is true in cybersecurity, because I have my favorite saying in cybersecurity is there's nothing new under the sun. Whatever you say, oh, have you seen this latest attack? But when you drill down, at the end of the day, it's something that we've seen before. That's why it gives me this whole thing about there's nothing new under the sun. It's like what has been before will be again, and that's why I find cybersecurity fascinating, is because basically it's just kind of reinvents itself, but it's not new. We just the way people have been deceiving each other, the way they've been gaming each other, it's the same. It's just that maybe the tools change, and the time changes, but there is nothing new under the sun, and that's why I think is so great about Shakespeare is that he was able to identify this human condition and those human traits and kind of the way people interact with each other and how we scam each other and whatever, and just kind of put it into the most amazing verse and prose and stuff, and as you say, it kind of it transcends time and culture and all that kind of stuff. So yeah, pretty good.
So I'm going to talk about my experience with it. I went to 2 Broadway shows, and they were both, I think, around the same year. I agree with Jeff, like the whole experience, like going out to dinner and then going to a show, I thought was fantastic. I think I picked the wrong shows to go to.
Oh, no.
So, well, I didn't even pick. So the first one that I was going to tell you was the show Wicked, which became a movie. And I saw it before the movie was released, but I just thought, like, this is not a show meant for adults, even though you could pick up on things that kids wouldn't get, right? Because we've seen The Wizard of Oz and the backdrop. And I don't know how many people who are kids today have seen The Wizard of Oz, but it was like a school trip because there were half of the audience were children who were, I think, on a school trip. And I was like, okay, well, this wasn't the best show to go to. And I think the movie is probably better than the show. This is where my hot takes are going to get us a ton of hate, because the other show that I saw was Book of Mormon. And I also didn't like that. And the reason I didn't like that was I thought that they were making fun of Mormons. And I'm not a Mormon. I don't have any like really close friends who are Mormons, but I'm just not into making fun of people based on their religion or their race or gender or whatever. And so I just didn't like the show, and I felt like getting up and leaving before it was even over.
Oh God, you wound me very deeply, because the one show I have seen on Broadway was Wicked. I kind of managed to get a ticket, and the moment where she says, for the first time in my life, I felt. And the audience was anticipating the word wicked, and clearly most of the people who were in that audience had been before and knew it really well. And when she said the word wicked, I mean, the whole kind of just exploded. And to me, it's a very American musical, because I've seen it in London and it just doesn't work, because the words like popular doesn't, it just popular doesn't rhyme correctly. But thing with Wicked, it's a palimpsest, right? So it's a story that's been written over, and I think there is just so much in there about prejudice and kind of how people are conditioned to hate things without really understanding why they should hate things, and it's all about free speech and all that kind of. There's just so much in there, Jim. You need to look at it again, and I think the show is way better than the films. Yeah, I don't know. Anyway, so yeah, you wouldn't.
I'm with you, Warwick. One of the other ones I've seen is Wicked. I saw it at the Chicago Theater, so not on Broadway, but it was fantastic.
Yeah,
it was great.
And I saw it with Idina Menzel and Kristen Schneier with. So I mean,
now you're just showing off.
I mean, it's just like to me that just was. Well, the thing is, I said to the concierge, "Look, I've got one night. I just want to see a show on Broadway. Go and see this." And I think, well, no, Wizard of Oz not for me. He said, "Just trust me, go." And I think that was probably the answer I should have given in the beginning. But I'm glad that I didn't, because now Jim just trashed it.
So here's what I think. People who have made it to this point in the show, if you've got a strong opinion, go to the YouTube, whether you're watching on YouTube or listening, go to the YouTube and post a comment and say who's right, who's wrong, and, keep it nice, but...
My guess is you're going to be in the minority, Jim, but I don't know.
That's
This will be a
usually the way
good
it
sampling
works,
for our
right?
audience. Who knows?
Les Mis, I got it on my list. I'll do it.
Next time you're in London, make sure that you go and see it.
And next year, we'll have you back for EIC, and maybe I'll have seen it at that point, and we can discuss.
Jim, was dinner good at least? I mean, did you have a good dinner?
Dinner in New York City around Broadway, wonderful.
What'd you have?
I don't
Pizza?
remember. I don't remember my last bad meal in New York City, though.
Yeah, New York has got great food. Every
Great
corner.
food.
All right, so we found a lighter way to pop off at the end. So appreciate that. We do have, like as Jim mentioned, discounts to attend EIC this year. So go to our website, idacpodcast.com. Scroll down, grab that code. Let's see what else. We'll have links in our show notes to connect with Warwick, as well as some of the research he mentioned, again, as well as the link to EIC itself for people to learn more about that. Links for Jim and I to connect with us on LinkedIn, send us messages, whether you agree or disagree on whatever has been said here on any topic is always welcome. And looking forward to giving you the official fist bump of gratitude when I see you in Berlin in about a month.
Yeah, looking forward to that too.
Yeah. And so we'll go ahead and leave it there for this week. Thanks everybody for watching and or listening, and we'll talk with you all in the next one.
You've been listening to Identity at the Center. We hope you've enjoyed the show. Make sure to like, rate, and review. And we'll be back soon. But in the meantime, hit the website at identityatthecenter.com. See you next time on Identity at the Center.